Great. And I'll shrink this up here a little bit. All right. So first, thanks everybody for joining, and I apologize for the time change. We probably lost a few people there, moving it from 9 Pacific to 8 a.m. So anyway, thanks for joining us. We have a small group here. I suspect we'll have a few more people join, but it's still going to be a small group. So in some ways, that's really nice because, if you have specific questions or, want to kind of interact around the material, feel free. You can unmute yourself, and jump in and, turn on your video if you want, whatever you're comfortable with. Anyway, so I wanted to jump in and introduce myself. So my name is Jeff Tarrant, and I'm a psychologist, board certified in neurofeedback, and then also the director of the NeuroMeditation Institute based in Eugene, Oregon. And really what we wanted to do with this webinar today was kind of introduce a new piece of software that we have developed and that we're working with, which allows us to analyze some of the neurofeedback data that we're using in conjunction with meditation. And so before I kind of just launch into showing you the software and playing around with some data, which is what we'll do for the majority of the time, kind of show you how it works with some real data. I wanted to kind of give a backdrop. I assume that the people watching this, whether now or on a recording later, are going to come from a variety of backgrounds and experience levels. And so, want to kind of lay a little bit of groundwork with this before we just dive right in. Okay, so there we go. First off, for those of you that aren't familiar with kind of our approach, and by our, I mean the NeuroMeditation Institute, what we've essentially done is identified 5 different styles of meditation based on how a person is paying attention. So what they're doing with their attention, what their intention is during the practice, which brainwave patterns are activated, and in what brain regions. And so when you kind of take all of that into consideration, we can pretty cleanly identify 5 different styles. Now, does this encompass every possible meditation in the world? No, of course it doesn't. But it does capture a lot of the different elements involved in, I would say, most practices. And so just briefly, let me describe each of these. By the way, this is based on research in the field, certainly some of which we've done, but really mostly done by other researchers. So there's a couple of citations at the bottom of the slide there that you can kind of check out that really gets into a lot of this material. So focus practices are any practice where you are intentionally holding your attention on a single target. So it might be the breath or a mantra or an image of the Buddha or whatever. You're holding your attention on one thing. The attention wanders. You notice the attention wanders and you bring it back. So any of those practices that involve that basic formula are going to have some commonalities in terms of how the brain is engaged. So we can kind of put them in one cluster. Mindfulness is the next one that we deal with. And so just to be clear, we're using the term mindfulness in a very specific way here to refer to a very specific way of engaging in meditation. Also recognizing that that term mindfulness is being used kind of in our culture to mean just about everything, kind of as an umbrella term. So just to be clear that we're using it in a very specific form to refer to any kind of a practice where you are shifting your attention into more of an observing state, so that you're looking at your thoughts, you're looking at your feelings, you're looking at your bodily sensations without attachment. So it's really this observer role, sort of an accepting of whatever's happening in the present moment, without grasping for things you like, without pushing away things you don't like. So it's a very different kind of attention than focus. Now, certainly they can go together in a practice, but they're distinct in terms of what is involved and what what parts of the brain are engaged. Open heart practices, these are going to be any kind of practices where you are intentionally activating a positive emotional state. So loving kindness, compassion, gratitude, forgiveness, things like that. So you're activating intentionally a positive emotion and then doing something with it. So loving kindness and compassion is probably the most common form of this, especially from a research perspective. But you'll also see other things, Tonglen, and then all of the kind of positive psychology oriented practices. Quiet mind, this is the stereotype of meditation, right? So this is going to be any of those practices where you are learning to shift into a state of consciousness that is very, very quiet. There's not much going on. You're not directing your attention in any particular way, and there's really no target of attention. There's sort of nothing happening. And, this is a common state in transcendental meditation and Zen, and of course, other traditions. Zen and TM are probably the ones that have the most research behind them that fit into this category. And then the last one, this one's a little bit of a vague one still, deep states. We don't always include this in our discussion, but we're including it today. So alpha theta, those of you familiar with neurofeedback, alpha theta types of practices would fit in deep states. So this is kind of a state of consciousness that it's an expanded state, and it's also non-directed. So there's some similarities to quiet mind in terms of subjectively what it feels like. The difference is that in quiet mind, everything is kind of inhibited, meaning there's nothing going on. There's no visuals, there's no talking, there's nothing. It's just kind of quiet. Whereas with deep states, there could be a lot of other stuff going on, but it's non-directed. So for some people, it will almost feel like a dream state where there's stuff going on, but you're sort of an observer to it. You're not controlling it in sort of a normal waking consciousness type of way. So there's other ways, there's other practices that we can use to get into similar states besides alpha theta. So these are the 5 styles that we address in our program. And, we have ways to kind of work with these that don't involve neurofeedback. But then, of course, connected to our topic today, we have specific protocols. So specific ways of using neurofeedback to assist with each one of these. And so this is kind of an orientation of what we're going to be talking about here, is because, so great, we've got these 5 styles. That's a great starting point. But then we also want to be able to analyze those sessions and look at them more carefully. Whoops, sorry. So at the moment, we have a few different ways to work with our protocols. So primarily we work with BrainMaster and BrainAvatar software. That's what I've been using for a long time. It's what we developed a lot of these protocols. That's the platform that we developed it in. And so we have protocols that are both 2-channel protocols, meaning I'm going to use the word training here, but I'm going to use it lightly. You're training 2 different locations. So you might be looking at PZ and also FZ and also at PZ. So 2 channels. We also have protocols for sLORETA and BrainAvatar so that you're able to look at deeper brain regions and train those specifically. Train, again, in air quotes. So for example, you can see here's a picture of me, and that's using sLORETA, where we're targeting the looks like the posterior cingulate. You can kind of see it highlighted there. And then here's one of our trainers, Camila Orlinska, and you can see she's got 2 channels. Here's another example of a 19 channel, so you can do sLORETA here. We also have protocols available in NeuMind software, BioTrace Plus, and then we're working with Eager to get protocols built into their system as well. Hopefully that will be coming in the near future, next few months. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Still working on it. So here's the problem, right? Is that, and this is why we started trying to come up with a solution, is because when you record, you hook yourself up and you're doing some sort of a neurofeedback plus meditation session. So you're recording all of this data. And then generally at the end of the session, what do you have? What do you have access to in terms of information? Typically what you're going to get is some sort of distribution of the EEG signal into the kind of traditional bands, right? So delta, theta, alpha, low beta, beta. This came off of the BrainAvatar software. It's just a screen capture of a specific segment. So you've got these EEG bands, and then you've got some sort of a measure, an average of how many microvolts occurred in a certain segment of time. Now, in this case, it was broken down into, I think, 1 minute segments, right? So you can kind of see, here's minute 1, here's minute 2, here's minute 3, and here's the average power that was measured during the session. Usually, you don't even see it broken down into 1 minute segments. It's just an average for the entire session. And while that information can be useful, we're really losing a lot of data. And it's a little bit problematic, right? Because what if, let's just pick something really simple to start with. Let's just say that you're doing a meditation where you're expecting to increase alpha somewhere, right? And so you're measuring alpha in that location. And you do a 20-minute meditation. And you get an average of your alpha activity during that session. And then you want to compare it to yesterday's meditation. And you got an average of yesterday's session as well. Well, that 20-minute average contains a lot of, meditation and mind-wandering data, all kind of crammed into one metric. So you might be looking at these numbers and there may not be much of a difference, even though the experience might have felt very different, because you're including everything in that one number. And so it's really hard to using that to get a clear picture of, like, from a brainwave perspective, was anything different between one meditation session and another? You're just looking at kind of these giant averages. And so we really wanted a system where we could look at more information. So one of the things that I was interested in was trying to see, is there, how can I get a clean picture of the percent of time during the meditation that the specific criteria were met? So again, let's use that simple example before. Let's say I'm measuring FZ and PZ, and there's something that I want to happen at FC. Let's say I'm rewarding gamma, okay? And then there's something happening at PZ. Let's say I'm rewarding alpha 1. So wouldn't it be cool if you could say, well, what was the percent of time during the session that gamma at FZ was above the threshold, and the percent of time that alpha 1 was above the threshold, and what was the percent of time that these two overlapped, that they were both above their respective thresholds at the same time? Because that's really what we want, right? That would really sort of define this particular meditation, is when both of them are in the right place at the right time. So, that might be really useful data to see each of them individually and then together. So this is one thing we wanted to be able to do. We're also interested in trying to figure out, well, wouldn't it be interesting to be able to measure something that we call stability, right? So it's like, what is the length of time that you're able to maintain a specific meditative state? So think of it this way, right? That if you're a beginning meditator, or maybe it's a meditation you've never tried before, you might only be able to hold on to that meditative state for 2 seconds. So think about times when you've done maybe a focused meditation, right? And you're paying attention to your breath, and it's literally 3 seconds before you're starting to think about something else. And then you bring yourself back. So looking at that, like, how stable is your meditation? So that seems like a really useful way to examine kind of improvements in meditation. Are you able to hold the state for longer and longer periods of time. Or if you look at the entire meditation session, if the first time you did it, you only had 10 moments that were 3 seconds long of meditation, and the second time you had 15 segments that were 3 seconds long, that seems like improvement, right? So that's another way to kind of look at it. We also wanted to be able to kind of slice and dice the session because, again, you know, it's very common for people when they're meditating, right? They might start off the first 5 minutes, they're focusing on their breath. And then the next 5 minutes, they're whatever. Maybe they switch and they're focusing on, they're imagining light moving in and out of their third eye. And then the next 5 minutes, they're doing a mantra or whatever. Well, wouldn't it be useful to be able to break the session up into those time periods and compare them head to head and say, well, what was different? So, you know, when you start to break this apart, it really becomes instructive. And I think it's actually a really useful tool to figure out, to start to understand what's happening for the person during these times. What types of strategies might be better suited for that person that might help them attain that meditative state more effectively. And then, of course, you can compare sessions. So if you did the same session 10 times, you could start to pick and choose, you know, say like, oh, I want to compare session 1 to session 10, or I want to look at all 10 sessions. And not just in those metrics we identified, but in some other things as well. We want to look at some other brainwave characteristics. So we'll get into all that in a moment. So for those of you, we're going to be focusing on BrainAvatar because right now that's the only input that we're able to use in this software. Over time, we're going to be expanding that, but at the moment we're only using BrainAvatar data. And so what happens, for those of you familiar or not familiar with BrainAvatar, is that after you run a session, it automatically saves your data from that session in a studies folder. So when the software is installed on your computer, you end up with this folder on your desktop that says Avatar Studies. And within that is every session that you've created and run. So here's a little snapshot inside my studies folder, right? So you can see it's in the C drive, program data, BrainMaster studies. And I just kind of cropped this so you can see, oh, here's some of Jeff's folders, right? So I was doing some deep states work, some focus meditations. So you can see the folders that correspond to the sessions you've been running. And then here I opened up the deep states folder. So within here, you can see here's the EDF files. So the EDF files are kind of the raw EEG files. And so what we're interested in are these ones down here, these CSV files. So they're Excel sheets. And you can see that they correspond to different days and times. So here's one from 8:26, 5:48 a.m. Here's another one the same day, 6:02 a.m. So I stopped a session and then started another one. Here's another one a little bit later. Whoops, sorry. Gotta be careful with this mouse. So this is the data that we're going to be interested in, because when BrainAvatar saves each session, it saves it in a CSV file that gives you just a ridiculous amount of information. And so we're going to take advantage of that because that data is already dumped into an Excel sheet. So what we're doing with our software, with the report writer, is importing that Excel sheet so that we can analyze and work with the data. Here's a screen capture of one of those CSV files. So in this case, you can see, now you can't see everything because it's huge, but you can see there's all of these segments looking at specific components of that protocol. So in this case, one of the things that was happening was I wanted beta to go down in the frontal lobe. So that's what this one is measuring. It's measuring beta in the frontal lobe. That's what this area of interest is. And so you can see the values of beta going in 1/8 of a second segments. So this time here, So 0.125 seconds, 0.25 seconds, 0.375 seconds. Now, you can see some of these values are ridiculous, right? You know, your beta in your frontal lobe is not going to be 123. But that makes sense, right? Because, you know, what you are getting here is a bunch of artifact, right? So it's the very beginning. It's the first second. So I'm blinking, my eyes are open, they're closed, I'm shuffling around, I'm still getting settled. So probably this data at the beginning is not even going to be real, right? You can see it's already starting to settle down pretty dramatically by 4 seconds. The second area here, frontal beta down, so it looks like it's the same, right? But this one is the value of the beta in the frontal lobe. This is the threshold setting. So you can see where I've got the threshold set, 7.7. Now, if I change that at some point, then this value will change. If I leave it the same, it's going to stay the same. Now here I'm looking at the posterior cingulate cortex. So I'm using sLORETA, obviously. So using the 19 channels. And I'm looking at the posterior cingulate, and I'm looking at beta there as well. And I also want that to go down, right? Which is not really important for this. So this is beta in the PCC and the threshold. Here's alpha in the PCC and the threshold. Delta in the PCC, the threshold. So these are the 4 that I'm actually interested in for the protocol. This is a deep states protocol. Okay, so it's a little bit different than alpha theta, but it's kind of a squash protocol, but it's broken apart. So I want beta down in the frontal lobe, and then in the PCC, I want beta down, delta down, alpha down. So all 4 of these. And then after that, I can start to identify other things that would be interesting to look at that aren't necessarily part of the protocol. So frontal lobe delta, success ratios, and this goes on because there's like 32 of these, I think. So there's a lot of data you can grab out of here to import. So the report writer itself is a web-based app. And so, you know, you can just log in at neuromeditation.net. So we're going to go do that. Let's switch over. Let's see here. All right. Somebody give me a thumbs up or something that you can see the report writer screen from my web browser. Thanks, Mark. All right. Thanks, Eric. All right. Okay, so let me get back to here. All right, so here's what it looks like when you log in, right? So I've already got mine. I already have a profile, of course, so I'm just gonna, it's already saved, so I'm gonna log in. So the advantage of doing it this way, of course, is that all of the data is kind of saved on the cloud. So everything's kind of accessible from no matter where you're at. So, you know, at the moment, I've got 4 clients kind of loaded here. You can see that there's a way to make them private so that you can't see somebody's exact name. And so, you know, it's very easy just to start a new client, right? You just hit the plus button and it prompts you to enter basic information for your client, right? Their name, gender, race, etc., medical concerns, psychological concerns, etc. Create a new client. We're not going to create one right now because I don't need another test folder. Okay, so anyway, here's me, Jeff Tarrant. So let's open that up. And you can see so far I've uploaded, previously I've uploaded 4 different sessions. And so I actually recorded some new data yesterday. So it's totally fresh. I've never even analyzed it. I've not done anything with it. So I thought it would be a good way to demonstrate some of this with real data and stuff that I've never even looked at. So here's what you would do, right? So I've got a protocol, and I did 2 different things yesterday. I did a focus protocol and I did a deep state protocol. So I want to upload that focus session. So this little button here, upload a session. You can either browse to go get it, or you can just drag it over here. So we'll browse, and you can see it went right to my studies folder. You could also just navigate there. So this would have been Jeff Focus FM. So this is what we looked at before on that slide I was showing you. So let's go down to the bottom for the most recent session. Let's double check this real quick. So here it is right here. And so I'm going to open it, tell it to upload the file. So it's going to upload it and it says, oh, great, you did it. And then it's also going to say, great, based on the content, we identified it as Focus version 2. So basically what we've done is we have, we had to code the software to know how to read those CSV files depending on which kind of a protocol you're using. Right now, I think we have 20 different protocols loaded in. And, you know, so at this point, it's a little bit tricky because what it means is that you have to use protocols that we have created in order to, you know, use the software, right? Because it's looking for specific things. So if you're using one of our protocols, then it knows what to look for. So in this case, it identified it as Focus version 2. Here it is right here. You can see I've got another one of those up here. Now I can edit this. You know, if there's anything that if I want to call it something different or add the session date. So this was, let's see, this was yesterday, right? So the 8th. I don't need to change anything else. I'm going to save that. Okay. So here we've got the session loaded now. So now we can take a look at it. So if I click on that, it's going to open that data into the report viewer. And so the first thing you see right here is the two aspects of this protocol. So in this case, I'm looking at theta up in the anterior cingulate. So increasing theta in the ACC and simultaneously beta down in the precuneus. So this is one of our variations of a focus protocol. So before I start, and this is the, you know, here's the beta activity in the precuneus. Here's the theta activity in the ACC. You know, here's the scale of time. So right now it's about 1.5 minutes. You can change that with the plus or minus, you know, so now there's 5 minutes on here, you know, or you can extend it out. So whatever you want to do there. If you go into the gear icon up here, the settings, there's a couple of things that you can choose that are, I think are helpful. So it says number of standard deviations. You can use this as a way to kind of clean your data a little bit. So you can tell it, okay, any values that are more than 1.5 standard deviations beyond the average are just going to get eliminated. You know, so it's a way to kind of artifact your data. And you can set this to whatever you want. I've actually found with these protocols, 1.5 seems to work pretty well. But in some cases, if you had a giant increase of something somewhere in your session that only lasted for a few moments, you're gonna have to change that, right? Because otherwise you're gonna edit that out, even if it's real. And then there's also this little thing here, which is, you know, why not? Initial duration to ignore. So remember we were saying that the first few seconds is kind of garbage data, right? It's like you're getting settled. And then we've also got by default that it's going to use the thresholds that are in that data set as your thresholds in the software. Okay, so we didn't change anything, so we'll just leave it alone. All right, cool. Now, in here we can start kind of looking at data. There's a few things that we can look at. So first off, before I do anything else, you see here, it's giving you some scores for, whoops, sorry about that. It's giving you scores like we talked about earlier. So the percent of time that theta was above the threshold was 54%. The percent of time that beta was below the threshold was 48%. So interestingly, the time that they intersected was only 20%. So again, this is I think a useful way of understanding this, right? That it's like, if you look at these numbers, like, oh, 50% of the time I was in kind of a good meditative state. Nope, not really, because they have to happen together. Now, another way to look at this is there's this little button here we've got called Show Score Indicators. And if I click on that, what it does is it highlights the different areas of the chart so that you can kind of see if they're successful or not. So green ones, green areas, is where they're meeting criteria. So theta is supposed to be above the threshold. Here's the threshold line right here, this dark green line, the heavy solid line. So you can see if it's above it, it's green, and if it's below, it's kind of this purple. And then it's the opposite for this one because we want beta to be below the threshold. So this is successful where it's below. And then any place where they intersect, where both of them are happening at the same time, you get this heavy pink area. So this is kind of a cool feature and a nice way to scan the data so that you can kind of see patterns, right? Maybe there's times where there's a big solid chunk of pink, or, or there's a lot of little pink lines in places where there's not much. Now, in this case, it was only 6 minutes long, and it's kind of just spread out all over the place. And you can see that, boy, it was never really held onto for very long. If you look at this period of time, that's only what, 5 or 6 seconds. So let's expand this out so we can kind of see a little better. So, maybe it started at 48 and ended at 51. So this is really only 3 or 4 seconds. So even just scanning the data like this, you can get some pretty valuable information, which is that in this particular meditation, I was not holding on to my meditative state for very long. I was kind of dropping out pretty quickly. Look how quick some of these are, like little moments, like it's a little blip, right? So it's like in, out, in, out, in, out. Now you can also kind of play around and experiment with, it's like, well, what if the threshold was a little bit easier? What if I would have made the threshold a little easier for theta? So by easier, what would that mean? It would mean I'd be decreasing the threshold. So watch what happens. If I drop that threshold a little bit, all of a sudden, all the metrics start changing. So this is a way that you can kind of experiment with, looking at the data and kind of seeing what would happen if you change those thresholds in real life. Now, there's a couple of additional features that are kind of fun here. So first off, artifact management, right? So like let's say that there's something that you need to get rid of. So let's scan this real quick and see if anything really jumps out at us at being significantly problematic. Not really, it's pretty clean, right? But this beginning part, now it's already pulled out. You can see that red line. So you remember we set it to automatically get rid of the first 5 seconds. And so it did, it got rid of that first 5 seconds. But if we wanted to get rid of something else, let's just pretend, let's go down here. Let's say we saw something that looked like an artifact, or we knew that, the last 15 seconds, we weren't meditating. We were, thinking about something else. And let's say we wanted to get rid of that. So you can kind of click here and drag as far as you want, kind of highlighting that area and add it as an artifact. So it's basically taking that data out of the calculations. So it kind of put it here. So you can do as many of those as you want. And then of course, if you want to get rid of that, you can just, you just X out of it and get rid of it. So it's an easy way to kind of artifact the data. Now you can also, let's see here. Oh, interesting. This must have been sort of a baseline practice session. There must have been another one in there because it looks like when I did this, I had a longer practice. Let's go back and upload the other one. All right, let's go get this other session. Well, that's weird. It looks like it's not. I wonder if I did something with that data. Let's go look at my other sessions. Let's look at the deep states because I did that one yesterday too. And oh, that looks a lot bigger. Okay. I'm looking at the size of the file. So let's grab this one. So 9.8, that was yesterday. And let's open this one up. This is longer, so we'll have more to kind of play with here. Now, this was a deep state session. So we'll kind of play with the data a little bit, and then we'll compare it to some previous deep state sessions. So my session was uploaded. It identified it as deep states sLORETA version 1. Okay. All right. So here it is down here. Don't need to edit it. Let's open it up. Now, you remember when we were kind of talking about this, there's actually 4 things we're interested in. So all 4 are listed here. Now you see some wild stuff here at the beginning, right? That's that delta. Now, actually, if I hover on here, oops, I clicked. You can actually see what the microvolts are at a specific point. So if I kind of like pick a spot, so right there, it's, 31, over here, 52, that's not going to be real, right? So let's go to that artifact management. Let's clean this up just a little bit. So clearly at the beginning, I was, fiddling around or fidgeting or getting settled or messing with stuff or something. So let's just clean all this out here at the beginning. Let's just get rid of that. Okay. Saw some of those numbers jump when I did that. Let's kind of take a peek and see if there's other things that are just like kind of way off track here. What's this one? 35. This doesn't look like real data. Let's get that out of there. We'll just see if there's any things that are really gratuitous. If that's the right word, we'll go with it.
Jeff, how come those didn't go out with the 1.5 standard deviation rejection?
That is probably because there's enough of it kind of scattered throughout the session that it actually kind of stayed. You can see that some of it did get cut off. You see where it's red? So
that indicates that you're not using it.
Right. Yeah. But some of it still got kind of trapped in there. I think it's kind of like, it's just like on BrainMaster, right? Like if you set the thing to like, what's it defaulted at? 255 or something microvolts for the artifact thresholding. And, when you look at the file in BrainMaster, you'll see those areas that are kind of highlighted out, but, there's stuff that's clearly artifact that still gets left in, because it sort of didn't quite meet that criteria, even though it's clearly an artifact. So same thing, if we made it pickier, so let's see what happens if we, drop this to 1. Yeah, it's going to be way pickier. So, that might be a simpler solution for this one. In fact, I think we'll do that for now, just to make our life easier for this particular session. Now, it's
maybe you were very, very deep and those are real.
Yeah, that could be. I don't think so, but I appreciate your faith in my ability to get into a deep state while I got wires on my brain. I actually tried to kind of keep track of a few different aspects of this practice. And so let's say that I wanted to kind of do that and analyze it, right? So we've artifacted it a little bit. If you look here, we got a few things kind of pulled out. If I go to this button, segment comparison, okay? So I can go back here and I can say, okay, I'm going to grab this beginning part, right? Okay, I'm going to make this a little bit wider, expand it a bit more. So the first 3 minutes in my notes, I was just messing around. Like I wasn't really meditating yet. So we're going to grab this first 3 minutes. I'm going to add it here and I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it setup. Okay, so it's going to kind of grab that data. All right. So now let's grab the next segment. So I've got basically between 4 minutes and 5 minutes. So approximately here. So this was a short time, but we'll grab it. So here I was kind of doing my, like a little, kind of invocation kind of a thing at the beginning of my practice. Okay, so it's just one little snippet, and then sorry, that's not right. I was looking at my focus practice, so get rid of that. That's not true. I lied. So from 3 minutes to 17 minutes, looking at my notes for the correct session. So this is a long section, right? So it's like, I'm just going to drag it and drag it and drag it here. So my note was clumsy. So for this big chunk of time here, like my meditation was a little bit sloppy, right? It was like, I couldn't really get into the state. And was just kind of having a hard time kind of getting there. So let's grab all of this. Keep going, keep going. It's moving kind of slow trying to do this while I got an active Zoom session going. Come on, you can do it. So this is obviously a big giant section. We'll take it to like 16. Well, we'll take it to 17. All right, there we go. All right, come on. All right, add that. All right, so this I'm just going to call clumsy. All right, now the next section got kind of interesting. I finally kind of like landed into an interesting space. And boy, it felt like it was a lot longer than it was. When I kind of started coming out of it, I glanced at the clock to see what it was, how long I'd been there. And it was like 4 minutes. I was like, wow, okay, that felt like a lot longer. But so this kind of like 17-minute mark to about really 21. And, one of the interesting things here, it actually was kind of an emotional thing. It was actually kind of I'm going to call it a, heart opening part of the practice. I wasn't really expecting it, but it was kind of what happened. And then the last little chunk here, kind of 21 to say 24, was also kind of an interesting segment. I don't know what to call it except for more of a journey, right? So, a lot of times this is what people will kind of talk about with that deep states, right? You kind of like, you're there, but you're not there. There's stuff happening, but you're not controlling it. It was kind of one of those kind of deals. A little bit dreamy. Okay, so I've got these 4 segments. So now what we can do is if we kind of, let me move my picture out of the way. If we scroll down, you can actually see, let me collapse these. So I've got a little more space. So you can see here's the 4 segments. So you remember the first one was the setup. The second one was clumsiness. The third one was kind of a heart opening thing. And the fourth one was more of a journey. So if I just look at some of the basic stats, it's interesting because the combined scores, they didn't change much actually. Now this could be because of where I had my thresholds. I know how my brain works during deep states practices, and alpha and delta are the ones that I tend to put more emphasis on. So it's not a big shock that those are really the ones that are kind of getting the attention here. So, this is kind of cool where you can see when I said it was clumsy, especially this delta down, not quite as successful but much more successful in these two. And even though these are small segments, you can see actually when what I was describing as a journey, that was actually much more consistent with what we're kind of calling a deep state. Now this alpha down 28%, you might look at that and go like, God, that's not very good. For me, that's actually pretty good because I've got a ridiculous amount of alpha and it's hard to get down. So if it was below that threshold, 28%, for me, that's actually pretty amazing. So you can also go down here. So there's a couple of regions that we're interested in, right? The frontal lobe. If I scroll over, I'm interested in the posterior cingulate. So those are the two main areas I'm interested in. So I could pick some additional data if I wanted to look at. So like, let's say we wanted to look at gamma. Why not, right? In the frontal lobe. And let's say in the PCC, we wanted to look at alpha 1 and theta. Sounds good. So now when you scroll down, you can actually see a comparison of the 4 segments for each of those values, which gets kind of interesting. So gamma doesn't look like it really changed much. And again, if you kind of hover over it, you can get see the value itself. Look at the theta and the posterior cingulate. It actually decreased with each of the experiences. And which in this case makes sense, right? We're trying to decrease all of these things. Everything is, remember, is a squash. So going down is kind of better in this instance. And so, yeah, look at the journey one. It was lower kind of across the board. So you could look at other stuff too, like what was going on with gamma back there? Was that doing a similar thing? No, interestingly, gamma went up a little bit. Here, let's get rid of the other ones so we can see. Now I'm just kind of having fun here. I'm just kind of playing. And let's get rid of this guy because it's, we'll leave it. It's fine. So if you look at this, so 1.65, that's the first segment, 1.67, 1.77. Now that may not sound like much, but gamma is very tiny. So, really any movement at all is kind of significant. So this is kind of cool because what you will see in the deep states protocol is that we want everything to go down in the back of the head, but we often leave gamma alone, or in some cases, gamma will go up. And so that's what was starting to happen here, even though it was only a few minutes. We can also look at another metric. It's called, this is our stability comparison. So we can look at each of these different moments. Here's for the 4 different time segments. And let's get rid of this first one because it's just kind of taking up space, right? Nothing was really happening there. So let's get rid of that. And it's showing you the number of positive scoring moments that was in the 1 to 3 second range. So now this is a big chunk of time, right? So we expect we're going to have some of them. There's 31, 6 of them in this 3 to 6 second range, and 1 in the 6 to 9 second. So what's kind of cool is that actually the longest stability was during that heart opening. I had one that was 9 to 12 seconds long, so holding it a little bit longer. Again, these may sound like really short amounts of time, but it's actually very instructive because a lot of times during meditation, it feels like we're holding something for a long time and it's actually not. We're kind of like moving in and out, but we're moving in and out kind of quickly. So then you can also look at other things, the frontal beta down, the PCC down, again, looking at the specific values. So you can see I was pretty good at keeping that beta down in the PCC. There were times where it was, 108 to 111 seconds solid of just keeping that down. So there's a lot of data we can look at here. And then the last thing I wanted to show you was a kind of comparison of sessions, right? So let's go back. If I go back to my dashboard and you do this little thing that it looks like a copy, kind of an icon, it says sessions to compare. All right, so let's take our deep states data. Let's drop that in there. And here's another deep states session where I had some other interesting stuff going on from a different day. And let's do those two, and we're going to compare them. So now what it's going to do is kind of pull those two files. Maybe. And here you can see them. And it's got the segments identified. So I could click here and look at the whole session. So that's going to highlight the entire thing. Or if I really wanted to see what was the difference between this journey, because that was pretty good, and you know, this one where I was holding these shaman stones during my meditation. What's the difference between those two? And so here you can see that comparison, and this is a pretty dramatic difference for a lot of the variables. Look at that alpha down, 28% compared to 0, beta down 100%, 78%. So pretty significant difference between those two experiences. And again, you can do the same thing with the other metrics that we looked at. All right, let's look at alpha 1 and the theta, right? So you can see that actually the alpha 1 was higher. Again, makes sense, right? Because in this case, we want everything to go down. So the one that was less successful, there was more alpha. There was a little bit more theta, not a big difference. Let's look at that gamma, because that was kind of fun. Oh, interesting. With the shaman stones, the gamma was actually higher. So, you know, this is really sort of a tool to kind of investigate. When I've done this with clients, I've got one client that where I've spent the most time kind of analyzing this data, and they've done, I forget, maybe 10 sessions of the same protocol. And looking at her progress over time is really interesting and really instructive, because you can actually see where, you know, where she was struggling with different elements of the meditation over time. And what I mean by that is, you know, you could see, you know, for example, like when she was really in her head, like sessions where she was just thinking the whole time, you know, you could see what was happening in the posterior cingulate, right? Or if we were measuring something else like the insula, you could see directly what was happening and where she was successful and where she was having trouble. So this is kind of what we've got so far. Some of the plans that we have for the future involve obviously making this so that we can just import an EDF file, so that it could be from any format, from any kind of a EEG system. And then also starting to do things like incorporating subjective rating scales as well, so that you could send your client a questionnaire about their experience and they could fill it out. And so the software would track that data along with their meditation data. So you could kind of have that all together. And, you know, it's already got it where it'll kind of put it in a report for you that you can download or print or, you know, whatever. And so, you know, but being able to incorporate more of that information as well is going to be a feature that we'll add in the future. So, you know, if this is something you want to check out, you know, you can go to the website, create an account. I think it gives you, you know, 3 or 5 free uploads. So if you work with BrainAvatar and if you've got our protocols, you know, you can play around with it, run a session or 2, upload it, play with it. It's kind of fun, and I think it's instructive in many cases to understand what's happening. You know, if you're interested in learning more about our approach to kind of using neuro meditation, we do have a live, in air quotes, distance workshop coming up. So this is a Zoom workshop. It's on 3 Fridays, kind of spread out, coming up in October. So you can check that out. Information's on the website, and there's our website. So I know I've only got a couple of minutes. Somehow I always manage to take up as much time as I've got. But if anybody has any, you know, immediate questions, I'm happy to grab it before we wrap up.
What's the price of the software?
Oh, good question. We've got it where it's kind of like you buy sort of like a package, right, of like sessions. And so the price varies. You know, like if you want, you know, 25 uploads versus unlimited, or, I honestly, I don't remember. You'd have to kind of look on the website. But what we tried to do is kind of spread it out, assuming that some people are going to be heavy users and some people are going to be, occasional users, so that, trying to keep it reasonable for everybody.
Jeff.
Yeah.
I wanted to remark that I've been very interested in looking at time series in EEG, and boy, your software, particularly for this meditation protocol, is really a huge step forward in being able to understand changes in the EEG as a function of things that we do. So I'm going to be excited to try it out, because I think this really does kind of, it allows you to actually go from the kind of pioneering integration work of formulating these different styles of meditation to actually look at individual records to see whether electrophysiology is changing. And I really would strongly encourage you to work on those subjective rating scales so that we can actually examine the electrophysiology in light of the states of consciousness that people experience. I think that is going to be a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Jerry. And that means a lot. You're a sophisticated user, so I appreciate the kind words. And yeah, this is kind of stage one, right? And we've got a lot of big plans. And so, but I think, getting those subjective scales really does need to be kind of the next thing on the board. Cause I agree with you that, it's much more, cause right now I'm doing it all separate, right? Like sending out scales through a separate platform, or having clients fill them out in the office and then coordinating it with this data, which works, but it's a lot of extra steps, so, trying to simplify that, I think, is going to be really useful.
Just as a, when you think about scales, one of the persons who has done the most work in developing scales for looking at relaxation and meditation states is Jonathan C. Smith. His latest book is called, I think, well, I don't know that the latest book's title, but his state is called the M-State Tracker. It consists of 29 components of scales that basically take you from, was your experience simply feeling more relaxed, all the way up to unity with the divine. and I think something like that could really help us understand more what's going on when we teach people to relax, and the different kind of clusters and variations in states that people experience, and also to guide our training.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And, if you think of the exact citation on that, send it to me, please.
Okay.
That'd be great. And I got to go in 1 second, but Eric asked a question about OpenBCI and its compatibility with BrainAvatar. And honestly, I don't know how those two interface, or if they interface. This is one of the reasons. So Eric, one of the reasons that we're wanting to change the input strategy to read EDF files is because then it would be very easy to input data from basically any system. Because, as far as I can tell, pretty much every neurofeedback system will give you an EDF file of that raw data. And, if we can access that, and if we can use that, then we should be able to use just about any system. So, that's on future plans. It just may take us a minute to kind of get that pulled together. We're investigating the best way to do it. All right, guys, I got to go. I got another meeting. Thanks so much for showing up. And if you have any other questions, shoot me an email. It's just jeff@neuromeditationinstitute.com. I'd be happy to chat with you more, or answer any questions. Thank you
Thank
all.
you, Jeff.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Jeff.
All right, take care.